Hello guys from Plant Reviews, today 8th of June, and I will talk about three orchids I have. They belong to the same species, the Dendrobium nobile, the noble Dendrobium, and one I was lucky enough to rebloom. I own the two big ones from about 3 years, and the middle one is a pot actually made from keikis. Keiki are some basically plantlets that develop on the pseudobulbs of some orchids, including indeed the dendrobiums. I have a small plantlet here, as you can see. This is a keiki, still without leaves. However, most leaves, yeah, that's another keiki. You see this one second, and yeah, this is another kiki. When kiki develops, sometimes they develop roots, and most of the times, and then at some point, when the roots become too big, you can actually take them and pot them up, like in this small dendrobium pot I have. Anyway, let's start talking about the species. The Dendrobium nobile is a species of orchid that come from Asia, so it belongs to the orchid family, and it is distributed in temperate Asia, mostly in Eastern Asia, so China, Himalaya, in particular in the countries of India, Bangladesh, Assam, Nepal, Sikkim and Bhutan, and also in Indochina, particularly Myanmar, Thailand, Laos and Vietnam. Dendrobium nobile occurs in lowland and mountain forest, and often it grows on limestone rocks. However, it is also epiphytic, growing on other plants. The Dendrobiums, this dendrobium, the Dendrobium nobile, is a sympodial orchid, so they grow as cattleyas basically. So from the main pseudobulb, the main axis, they start producing other pseudobulbs, so they spread around quite easily. And in particular, as you can see, in Dendrobiums, the pseudobulb, in particular in Dendrobium nobile, are built in a shape of canes. Basically, the oldest one tend to shrivel at some point, as you can see. This was the first cane. Then they produce other canes in subsequent years, and it's very important to leave the old canes, even if they look unsightly. Yeah, they don't look unsightly, not look very good without leaves, because actually they are the storage reserves, for the energy reserves for the plant. And then they can actually they use them to obviously produce new pseudobulbs, flowers, and to grow. Obviously at some point you can remove the pseudobulbs, like this one is not longer viable. You see it's dry and basically dead, while this one is still green, so I can keep it, the one at the back, even if it's on the way probably off, because it has no leaves and seems quite shriveled as well, as you can see. Being a temperate orchid, it is very important that this orchid has different temperature throughout the year. The Dendrobium nobile can grow usually canes of about 40-50 centimeters tall, sometimes even taller, and due to the fact that it is quite a top heavy plant, it is very important that you keep it in pots that are quite heavy, so the orchid will not fall over. And the ideal medium is really bark chips, if you grow it in a traditional orchid medium, or if you grow it like me in semi-hydro. I have at the moment, orchid in semi-hydro. I have in Leica, so it's easy for me to check that a part of the lake is always humid, wet. You can see some nice green roots here, and I keep about 2-3 centimeters of water at the bottom in order to keep the Dendrobium very well hydrated, and this is particularly important in spring and summer, as I will later get back. Dendrobiums have, again, they grow, the pseudobulbs grow on canes, and they have kind of strap-shaped leaves, very green. They are lighter in full sun, darker if the plant doesn't receive much light. However, this is a plant that really needs a lot of light. The flowers are usually born in racemes, and usually when you buy this plant it has a shape like this. So on the canes are really full of flowers. They are born on the axis of the cane. Indeed, actually, you can see in my orchids, I have still the old pseudobulbs. If you see these dry bits coming out, projecting from the main axis, these are all flower stalks. So the flower stalks are quite short, and the flowers come very, very close to the cane, and it is a beautiful presentation of the plant. They basically look like a bouquet of flowers, and on each stalk they can be born 2 to 4 flowers, about 5 centimeters in size, sometimes even bigger. Colors range in a variety of colors, from rose to purple to pink to dark purple. Sometimes the lip is differently colored. Some hybrids have very nice dark purple lip that contrasts with the rest of the flowers. Some others, like the one that they have in bloom today, they are like white or cream. This is more creamy yellow colored. Some others are white with a lip that is there's a more intense yellow color. It's a very beautiful orchid. The shape resembles a kind of cattleya. Indeed, they are related to cattleya. They belong to the group Epidendra, to which cattleya also belong, even if they belong to a different tribe, the Dendrobine, like many other Dendrobium. In addition to the flower, that is, to the elegance and the beauty of the flower, you can see it has a kind of typical shape of the orchid. So 3 tepals and 2 petals that are pretty similar in shape, while the lip is usually differently colored, and obviously usually kind of bigger and more kind of a little bit closed up in comparison to the other petals and to the sepals, and indeed this is the lip. Another nice feature of the Dendrobium nobile is the wonderful fragrance. It resembles very much honey. It's very sweet. Some varieties can have some citrusy notes, like this one I have. It has a kind of note of citrus, while my other plant was a purple, is a purple Dendrobium. Unfortunately, this is not in flower, and had beautiful purple flowers, but was clearly honey scented, no trace of any citrusy scent at all. These orchids are very easy to find. You can find them easily online, but also very common in supermarkets, as well as in obviously garden centers. Usually are pretty cheap in the UK. They're about £10 to £15. Sometimes, obviously, you can find them more expensive if they are bigger specimens, but most of the supermarkets, they offer them at the moment between £10 and £15. The best medium, as I said, is bark if you go for traditional medium, or leca if you go for semi-hydro. They are very often sold in coconut bark or sphagnum moss, but this medium, these mediums, these potting mixes really strangle the roots, and it's very important the roots have like air to breathe. So I think clay pellets or leca, like the ones I have, work really good for the Dendrobium nobile. However, you have to be careful to keep them moist all the time, because otherwise they can actually dry up the new root tips. With the bark is a much safer choice, but you have to obviously to remember to keep it moist. Bark is best. I used to, when I had these plants in bark, I used to water them once every 2 weeks in winter, while about once every week in spring and summer, keep ensuring, especially in spring and summer, that the medium is quite moist. This is because if this Dendrobium is not a tropical orchid, so it needs to be provided a period of rest and a period of basically growth. In autumn and winter, you will basically see that the leaves start to dry up, and most of them will fall down. And this is the period when you have to decrease a lot the watering and ensure that to water the medium, the orchid, just enough to avoid the shrivelling of the canes. So if you have it in bark, just keep it, let it dry in between the watering. If you have it in leca, like me, what I do is ensuring that I leave very, very little water on the bottom to ensure that really the root tips are not burnt, but most of the leca anyway is dry. In spring and summer, instead, I have to ensure that the leca is moist throughout spring and summer, because this is the period of growth of the orchid. You basically realize that you need to increase the watering when you see the new leaf buds on the canes, and also, if you're lucky, flower buds forming. This year my canes didn't actually, well, I had flowers only one orchid, as you can see, but the flowers didn't, rather than start forming on the canes as it should have been, as you can see in the old canes, I didn't have any flowers on the canes, as you can see. Instead, this orchid decided to bloom on kind of new, I'm not even sure if call them canes, but basically decided, I can show you, to produce them in a very short raceme directly from the bottom of the plant. So I'm not sure if this raceme will evolve as actual cane. However, I will see. So I wanted to show you also this very unusual Dendrobium blooming. I'm not sure if it was that because last year I didn't actually fertilize it. One thing that you need to observe is that you should fertilize this orchid regularly. I didn't because I brought these orchids to my office because the temperature in the office in winter are very cold. They are between 3 and 10 degrees Celsius, and the best way to keep this plant in winter is actually ensuring that they receive a very cold period, indeed, without going to freezing temperature, so not below 0, but they're perfectly fine between 2, 3 and 10 degrees is the best period, and this is important to ensure that the flower buds are triggered, the flower bud formation is triggered. Then in April I started obviously to keep them, water them better. Ideally, these plants between spring and summer should be kept outside in partial shade. They should receive sun, direct sun, for a few hours of the day. I didn't put them outside yet because I didn't want really to ruin the flowers, because obviously in spring and summer sometimes the weather is unstable, and obviously I have lots of slugs in the garden. They might have eaten the beautiful flowers, so I really wanted to enjoy the flowers as soon as possible. But as soon as the flowers fade, I will move the plant outside so they can enjoy a good ventilation, hours of direct, some hours, a few hours of direct sunlight, without being in full sun throughout the day, because the leaves can be scorched. And then in autumn, late autumn, probably October, November, I will bring them back in a very indoors, in a very cool environment. Not too sure if it's again in my work office or in another. Maybe I will put them in the greenhouse, hoping that the freezing we will not get any freezing temperature this year. I will see what I will think about. I'm not too sure yet. I wanted to experiment actually to leave them in the greenhouse, because possibly these ones can tolerate sub-zero temperatures for a few days, obviously without water. And that's the reason, because also it's very important not to water the plants in winter and autumn, in late autumn, because obviously very, very cold temperature means that the water, if it's too much, can easily lead to rotting of the plant. The plant itself, other than that, is pretty easy to grow. As you can see, I didn't fertilize it last year, and I still had a nice, well, not a great blooming, but still, I have about 10 flowers on to show you. And it is pretty, a very pretty orchid as well. I hope to not forget anything to tell you. Let me see what else I can talk about. Yes, obviously, yeah. Humidity. This orchid can stand quite a low humidity, about even 50-60% is fine. However, about the sunlight, already said that it needs very bright light, so it can be actually in full sun, south-facing exposure, if you keep it on a windowsill, between autumn and spring. Only in summer is better, either an east-facing position, or even better in the garden, where it can receive a few hours of sunlight, natural sunlight. It's very important during this period to fertilize the plant as well, from spring to early autumn, with half dose fertilizer. The 777 is perfectly fine with this orchid, and is very important again to in order to for this to rebloom the drop in temperature during autumn. So remember, when you keep this, probably you will find this orchid in the shop between winter and spring. However, sometimes it can bloom basically any time. This is an orchid that really is forced for blooming quite a lot. So you can find these orchids in flower any time of the year. Obviously, if you find them now that is spring in flower, is perfect. Keep them indoors for blooming, so you can enjoy the blooming. As soon as the flowers fade, bring them outside in a place where they can receive ideally a few hours of direct sunlight in the morning. Fertilize them and water them, ensuring that the medium is moist enough. If you see new roots forming, try to repot them in bark or leca, but if you're not sure about the leca, go for bark, because I found that the bark for this kind of orchid is the safest and best medium. And ensure the bark is kept moist from spring to autumn, and try to keep the watering at minimum in winter. As I said, in winter, put the orchid still in a very bright position, as I said, south-facing windowsill if you don't have a conservatory or a greenhouse. Try to avoid sub-zero freezing temperature, but really try to put it in the coldest area of the house because it really needs this winter rest. And again, fertilize the orchid regularly from spring to summer. In this way, hopefully, you will get a blooming that is way better than mine, even if I can still enjoy the beautiful flowers of this creamy yellow Dendrobium, and most importantly, the wonderful honey scent with these citrusy notes. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, it would be great if you would subscribe to my channel, and obviously if you need any if you would like to put any questions down below in the comments, please do it and I will try to answer as soon as possible. And well guys, I really hope you enjoyed this quite long presentation about Dendrobium nobile. Sorry to be maybe a bit to have been a bit overlong, but I really wanted to try to not forget anything about this orchid. And what else I can say? Well, hopefully I will see you next time with another video. Bye guys.